it is a real honor to be here, and it would be great. And I've got Linda on chat. It would be wonderful, even if you just raise your hands, like who is currently seeking dollars to fund their company? Who's actually actively in pitches? You're like, okay. Or people who are actively looking for money? Because this is going to be the focus of today's topic, as Linda said. But she was right. Becoming a great storyteller in business is an essential skill. I say that all over my website, and it's absolutely true. And if you are in the pool of we are in active pitches, and it's the CEO that's always pitching, everyone on the team needs to be a good storyteller, because you don't know where and when that person who could write a check, who wants to get behind you, who wants to be on that advisory board, could show up. They could be sitting next to you on an airplane. They could be on the bus. They could be just in the grocery store. Who knows? You don't know. And when you become a compelling storyteller, even on the most mundane things, you become captivating and people want to lean in, as Linda said. So that's what the emphasis is. But today, I'm going to tell short stories and long stories. And as I'm telling maybe a long story, what I want you to do is you could put into the chat anything that I'm doing that you think, oh, I didn't think of it that way, or just write it down on your piece of paper. And if you think I stink, don't say anything, because I don't want that on the chat. Just kidding. But it's important for you to, I think, listen actively today, because here's why. Storytelling, and write this down, storytelling is creating a mind movie, okay? What I'm doing is I am intentionally knowing what I am putting in your brain and the pictures that I want you to convey. My slides should be supporting that picture that I'm trying to create, not usurp it. So I will be telling some stories. Let me know in the chat if you saw it, if you felt it, if you could feel it, the emotions that I, as the storyteller, might be going through. Now, when I'm doing a longer story, that is not something that you're going to be putting into a pitch. You don't have time for really long stories. You're going to be doing short stories. And short stories require even more skill set, because you have to be very careful on the word choices that you have, the way you use your voice, and your emotional impact that you're putting on that person. Okay, I have watched hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pitches. And so I have seen when someone stands up and they're amazing. And then I've seen where most people come up and they start with data, and it's just not as grabbing of the attention to the audience. So that's why Melissa's in business, is to help people go over to the first group that I talked about. So we're going to talk about your story fruition, which is what I call it, but it's also a founder's story. So each and every one of you are probably entrepreneurs. You all have your journey that you went on to start your company. That's a beautiful story. Every founder needs to have that story tight. And the reason being is that when you're on a podcast, people's like, how'd you get into business with us? Tell us. You don't want to meander, you don't want to stumble, you don't want to be boring. You want to be able to tell that story, because that is your wisdom and your journey. And that's what people are going to be like, God, she sounds really, really sharp. I relate to her because I went through a journey similar to that. So vulnerability is also very important in certain situations when you're storytelling in business, okay? In a pitch, I'll get into where you can show vulnerability in a pitch. I'm going to be changing the problem and solution, as Linda said. We're going to look at what the current model is, and I'll tell a story about that, your brain on storytelling, and we'll go into some client results. Now, today, my goal is that you will embrace the idea of why this skill set's important for you. If you are in current pitches, I want you to be thinking about your deck right now. And if your deck is opening up with stats, maybe we should talk. Or you should be thinking about, how can I open now with a story that then starts the second part, and you'll learn why that's important. And then if you're really, really interested, I will have a workshop available at the end of the month, and I'll give you the details at the end of that. Okay, so let's begin. So I'm standing in this swanky room in Seattle. It's 2018, and I am at the the Seattle University's business plan competition. And there's about 300, angel investors, and they're all there looking for the next big thing. Who's going to bring the next idea that they could write a check for? The stakes are high. The students are going to get up there on stage and pitch and present for 3 minutes without notes, and they have slides. And there's $10,000 on the table. And then not only that, there's accolades in addition to that. So they'll get press, and there's all these sort of things that can actually take their dream and start bringing it to its own fruition. As I'm standing there, I'm noticing each presenter's doing the same damn thing. They're all walking up, putting on their slides, and they're saying problem, and literally the word problem, and a whole bunch of words and some graphs. And then they say the solution, and it's them, but it's the same thing. Lots of words, no pictures, graphs. And then addressable market, pie charts galore. They love their pie charts. And I just sat there and I was like, what's happening here? Why is this? And it just hit me. It was like, wait a second, they should be storytelling. Like their problem could be the customer having the plight, right? And they're the hero. So why are we not doing this? And all of a sudden, it's like I had this epiphany right then and there. I don't know if you've ever done that in the middle of a big room of people, but I had one. It's like lightning bolt was like coming or shining light on me. And I grabbed the arm of the director and I said, Amelia, I could help. And I started just rattling off my resume. I'm like, I've got 25 years of sales and marketing and advertising. And if that's not sales and marketing, I don't know what is. And acting, I'm an actor. I know how to get it out of people. I tell stories all the time. I'm an improviser. She's like, okay. I'm like, I could help. A year later, she calls me and I walk into this room and there's these students there. And I was like, so tell me about yourself. And they did the same thing. Problem, solution, addressable market. I'm like, okay, stop. And that's when we started digging in. I'm like, tell me about your client. Who's your customer? And this one guy, Daniel, says, it's a woman, 25 to 54. I'm like, you mean grown-up women? Let's dial in a little closer. Who more do you reach? And he's like, well, she cares about, I'm a furniture maker and I have a platform that unites the furniture person who really appreciates furniture as art to the furniture maker, the custom wood maker. I'm a wood maker. I'm like, you're a wood maker? Are you that guy that's in his garage on the weekends and is just making cool bookshelves and stuff? He's like, yeah, that's me. I'm like, cool, okay. So who's your customer? And he starts really thinking now. And I'm like, does she care about having her furniture come out of a box with a lot of leftover screws? Not that I would know anything about that. He's like, yeah, that would probably be her. Well, the next thing you know, we now have this customer that he was able to bring to life in his presentation. And we were able to create her coming home, sitting down and looking out at her home, her castle, and seeing all the beautiful furniture that made her feel successful. It completely changed the way he did. And he ended up taking second place, which was really a big deal because he was probably going to be more like sixth place prior to him really getting the emotional impact that he needed. And while he was presenting, I could hear people in the audience going, Fred, that reminds me of your mother's table. It's so beautiful. It's so quality. And so when you have your audience actually talking about you or saying, I remember that, that is such a huge compliment because now you have touched their heart. They are now paying attention. It wasn't long after that I realized this is a need. This is a need. And I had been brutally fired from a job that I hated. And I had a situation where I couldn't travel and I just went for it. I'm like, you know what? I think people will need this service. And so I founded Story Fruition. It was May of 2019 and I have never looked back. And since that time, I am now working with companies all over the globe. I am working with CEOs, founders, keynotes, as Linda said, and I'm also working on my own stuff. So when I'm talking about storytelling, I walk it too. I study it 4 hours a week, 2 hours on Monday, 2 hours on Friday with some of the probably up and coming rising stars of storytelling in the country. I just did a show with them on Saturday in Chicago. It's an art form, but there's no reason that the stuff that we're doing that's out on NPR or PBS or whatever, there's no reason that those skill sets cannot move over into the boardroom. And that's where I am. And that is my story fruition in a long format. Okay. So that was a longer version, but I really wanted you to hear some examples. So in the chat, I have questions. Did you see the room that I was in and the swanky atmosphere? Did you see the hobnobbers? Could you see me seeing the students? Those are the things that I want to do. I want to be able to kind of create emotionally. And I didn't have to describe Daniel, but I wanted to show Daniel by the way I had him talk and the way I related to him. I was changing my tones and things like that. Now this is the bigger level. Now, why am I telling you a long story? When you're sitting down at dinner with an investor and he's really interested, or she's really interested, or they're really interested, and they're like, tell me about this. How'd you get into this? That's your time. That's your time to be a compelling storyteller, is be able to tell that story, do it well, and have them go, wow, that was awesome. Thanks. Okay. Tell me more. But during the pitch, you're going to be doing smaller stories. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. I wanted to get that very clear. And I think I just said it. It's because it's stories. And, go ahead and put it in the chat. Like, what is it about storytellers that you appreciate? And Linda, if you wouldn't mind, I can't see the chat because I've got all this stuff going.
Yeah, no problem. So we do have one question already, which is from Marina. And she said in her story, she involves her customers, but it's for customers, not for investors. So for investors, should we have another story or the same one?
Great question. And it will depend. I need to see your deck, but the point is who's your audience, right? So you should have, honestly, a library of stories so that you can pull them. And I work with companies on that, where we actually create different libraries based on verticals and whatnot. And that's really important. And it's important because your team should all be able to tell all those stories with impact. Okay. So yes, when you're talking to the customer, it might not be the same story. Or it may be the story, but it's told a little differently because the investor's looking at it from the science and the money of how they're going to make it. Like, how am I going to get my money back on this plight of this customer? Versus the person that you're just signing up needs to go, well, I want to sign up because that's me. So it could be the same company or the same story, but you're going to tell it with a different spin. Okay. But I do recommend you start writing down in this session today ideas of stories that you should be starting to formulate. Customer success stories are really important.
And so Teresa said she feels like emotional connection is important. Nita said being able to resonate is really key. Jillian said, like you said, it's about being able to relate. And Kelly noted that being interesting, engaging, and having an emotional connection is one of the most important things about being able to tell a story.
Awesome. Awesome. And so does everyone see a pie chart? No, you don't. That's not going to be doing what you just said. You all just said it brilliantly about what stories do. So that's where we're at. And this is what I see so many times. And right away, what's happening is it's like, tell me about yourself. And they're like, 40% of something is that. I'm like, that wasn't you telling me about yourself, right? But when you come in with a story, I'm leaning in. So take a look at any of your presentations, and it doesn't just have to be investor. This was one that I specialize in because I'm the pitch coach for Founders Live. And I actually help founders every single month in Seattle present how they're going to change the world in 99 seconds. And we have a story, a go-to-market, team slide, traction, addressable market, all the core stuff that an investor needs and wants. We can do it in 99 seconds. And I'm going to show you one in this presentation today in action. Okay. So here we go. We're going to go into the right brain, left brain. So when you show the chart, the brain, what physically is happening is that the brain is just looking at numbers and letters, and it's like 5% or something like that is engaged. And also every chart that you put up, every slide that you put up is giving me permission to either keep listening to you or to stop listening to you. So write that down. In every presentation, is my slide supporting my words or usurping my power? And the more you put on that slide, and I will show you some examples later, the more you'll be able to catch that. So reassess every presentation that you have to make sure that the slides are simple. So the brain's going on the left brain. The right side, though, is when you start bringing in story. And what happens is it ignites. It's going to have emotions, but serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, all these neurohormones are firing off. And that's when emotion starts happening. And that's when you start getting that engagement that someone put into the chat. Okay, so we want to have, like you said, the left brain and the right brain coming together and supporting it all. Because when you're doing, especially an investor pitch, you've got people there that are like, tell me the science, I want the science, but it doesn't mean they don't want the emotion. You have to do both. And most people aren't. Most people are pie charting their way all the way through these decks, and they still will get funding, many of them. But many won't. Many will see doors just like, why don't you give me a call when you guys are a little bit ready? Because they didn't get emotionally engaged. And I will show you later in a success story of that exact happening. They can show the problem. So here's a gentleman, Rick Beaton, love this guy. And he's in a very, very loud, very crowded space of HR tech. And he was having a hard time with his team being able to explain the fact that an HR person has several different types of programs and software. They're all disparate silos of data that is very difficult for an HR, so let's say a chief HR officer, to be able to know where an employee sits in their review process, in their morale levels, etc. And so what we did was we created a story of Sarah. And Sarah, it's a Friday afternoon, and Sarah has just lost another sales rep. And she cannot find what the feedback was from the manager because that's in this system and the manager didn't fix it. And that's over here in this system when they had their survey with Tiny Pulse, and she can't push them together. But enter Modus, which will now tie all of the systems together in one dashboard for Sarah to be able to instantly pull up that employee's record and see where they were and where they can learn to not lose an employee and get in front of it instead. He now opens with that story, and it's really helped people take a very complex piece of information and make it simpler. New flowers. Sometimes we have something in storytelling called the power of knowledge, which is where you know what it's about and you say things and you just assume everyone else knows what it's about because you live it every single day. This is your world. You got to take a step back, and that's where a third party can be really good. In fact, when I'm working with Founders Life, founder presenters, that's fantastic because I don't even look them up. Like I do not, in fact, when you first call me and we're going to talk about your company, I will not look you up intentionally because I want to see how you pitch. I want to see how you present your company before I have any preconceived notions about it. So sometimes it worked once where I was like, oh, I wish I had looked you up. You had 40 million users. Okay, great. But that's okay because they showed that to me in their presentation, which was fantastic. So I got to be pleasantly surprised. In this case, we have a brilliant baker and CEO who had grown up with food allergies her whole life, like just everything, grass, hay, dust, wheat, gluten, sugar, like so many problems, but she loved to bake. She loved sugar. And so when she became an adult, she was sick of feeling bad and went into her lab. It was her kitchen, but I call it her mad scientist lab. And she started creating different flours and different baking sodas and all these different ingredients to create goods that people with allergies could actually enjoy and even want to share. And this food is amazing. She's like the next thing that's going to be hitting Kroger. Like it's amazing what she does. Really tasty, not dry or chalkboardy or anything like that. She's got it. But I asked her, I said, Phoebe, unfortunately, I don't have a food allergy. So like, what happens when you have a gluten issue? And she's like, oh my God, you're cramping, Your bowels aren't going to be the same. Sorry, I know it's morning, but like she's physically telling me the pain, the physical pain of what it could be like. Even if someone grabs just the wrong soy sauce, it could really be painful. And she said to me, going through a restaurant is like walking through a landmine. I'm like, wow, why is that not in your deck? Because her deck was all, these are our ingredients. It was all graphs and pictures and nothing. And so what we did was we now open with different little characters. So they were just tiny stories, like one sentence, but they brought color and life to her presentation. So it was like, you know, this is Miranda. She just ate a cupcake that had peanuts in it. And I have a picture of this girl eating a cupcake and she's got tears coming down her face because she can already feel the symptoms coming on. And you know, this girl over here, it said she would feel like the kid that didn't get picked from soccer because you're just weird. No one wants to go out with you because you can't eat like everyone else, right? So someone listening to that now goes, oh, and you're changing that? Tell me more, right? That's the point of just tiny little stories that can be just a minute that can have an impact on your presentation. I had the honor this summer of working with the Korean government, the South Korean government. They have a whole bunch of entrepreneurs that want to expand in the United States. And they hired me to work with 15 different ones coming in. And they said, listen, we need to do storytelling. We see it. We've watched Founders Live. We love what you're doing. And that's not in our culture. Our culture is data, 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 data. And it is. Every single one came in, and this one company, I really loved what he was doing, but this is with a slide. He was showing his product of how it works. Now, when you look at that, does that pull you in? Or does that overwhelm, right? So what he was doing is he was showing us a system. Now, what he does is he actually helps restaurateurs survive. 1 out of 5 restaurateurs will survive. That means 4 out of 5 will fail. And the reason that they fail is that they're not looking at the science of running a business where their margins are going to cover keeping the lights on. So they said 38% of the cost of the food should be built into the plate of the food. Okay. They've learned that it was 52%. So if you're not at 38%, then you can't keep the lights on. You can't pay your employees. There's just too much going on, and it's constantly fluctuating. And so restaurateurs are basically just kind of going by gut instinct. You know, they're like, hey, that prime rib dish sold out well, so we'll buy more of that. But they bought it on a Thursday when the data's showing that it thrives on Saturday. Okay. And it thrives from 7 to 9, not 5 to 9. So you need to order the right amounts based on the data that we're picking up with the systems on your POS, as well as there was 2 systems that he was picking up. And his credit card slide. So this is how he was explaining that. And I'm like, okay, what if we have a character who is having their dream of finally starting a restaurant, and they are so excited, but they quickly learn that this isn't as easy as they thought, because the idea of running a restaurant sounds really sexy and fun and entertaining. But at the end of the day, it's a very high demanding job. It's intense, and there's a lot riding on you. And he's like, I never looked at it like that. And so we took his deck and we changed it to this. We had her starting with her opening and how enthusiastic it was, like, meet Kim. Meet Kim, and Kim has had her dream come true. She's going to start her cafe, and she sees all of her customers enjoying her fine, fresh, organic, vegan foods. Okay. But Kim is having problems. Kim cannot seem to get the money to be there at the end of the month. She's not organizing her purchases in the way that she needs. But then over here, enter Sikpama. And then he starts to explain it. With the swipe of the credit card and with the POS systems, we are able to take this data and show her right here where her sweet spots are. And now Kim is able to make intelligent data, facts, decisions on how to order her food at the right time for the right people for the right menus. Okay. Completely different. But to take all of those scraps away and add pictures so that, and these were separate slides. So when he was telling them, the slide was just that one slide. It was just the opening of this slide. Then we went into the problem because every story has to have stakes. So Kim wants to survive, right? She wants to be successful, and she's not, because she's making misinformed decisions. That's her problem. 4 out of 5 Kims are doing that. Okay, that's the addressable market. And then we can move into the addressable markets, and then we can start showing charts, because you got to have some charts because people want to see the science of it. But when we started with the story, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. Because really, like with the 99-second stories that we do, our job is really just to get the audience, the investor, the talent, the future advisor boards to go, I get it. Okay, I get it. Now I have questions. And then your next level of your deck will have more of the weeds, more of the science, even further in it. But never give up your stories. Always put your stories in, because that's what they're going to remember. They're not going to remember the pie chart. They're going to remember your story tied to the pie chart. Does that make sense? Okay, this was Lalo. And Juan Medina came to me for Founders Live, and he had this really cool idea. And the idea is that he wanted to have a place, a depository of memories for each person, so that when they passed on, the family could still keep them alive, right? So it could be fun birthday celebrations, it could be bad jokes that they told, anything. And he shows me his deck, and it's, again, all the science, how it works. It kind of looked almost like SICPAMA, a little cleaner, but it was close. And I said, how did you come up with this? And he's like, well, my dad died 18 years ago, and I didn't have anything about him, nothing. And I realized, this is awful. This is terrible. Like, maybe we can change this, because I miss my dad a lot. I'm like, why aren't you telling that story? It's like, no one would want my story. This is a business meeting. I'm like, no, I think they want your story. And so we opened with this, and pay attention. I'm going to play this. This is a pitch, 99-second pitch. Pay attention to where we start, Juan.
Hey there, I'm Juan Medina,
You
founder of Lalo, talking to you from sunny Seattle. Super excited to share with you all what we've been working on. Let's jump in.
It's 18 years after my father's death, and I'm standing at his grave with my family. My wife turns to me and says, Juan, tell everyone a story about your dad. And I have nothing. I realized at that moment that when we lost him, we not only lost him, but lost his stories, his empanada recipes, and some pretty bad dad jokes. Unfortunately, more than 50 million people a year in the US lose someone close to them, and like me, they struggle to preserve those memories. An old shoebox full of photos or a voicemail that they leave on a phone, but it's just not enough. So I'm introducing to you today Lalo, named after my father, a place to preserve family stories. You can share memories using video, images, or text. We provide video chat that you can record and watch back at any time, and conversation prompts to help you discover new stories, all for $25 a year. We have an experienced team with over 50 years in engineering, design, and business development, both from startups and big companies like Amazon, Netflix, and LinkedIn. We have traction. The Portland Institute of Loss has agreed to distribute our app through their 1,500 therapists. We have over 2,000 followers between Facebook and Twitter, and over 200 signups on Lalo.app, all leading us in the right direction for our beta launch scheduled in late August. Today, we're asking for $150K for a 5% equity stake, for engineering and marketing resources, and we can always use more beta testers, and you can sign up today on Lalo.app. Thank you.
Okay. I want to stop and hear from the group on that, on what you think. And if you want to take your microphone off, it would be great to hear what you think about that. Now, I will say this was a private one that he should not be putting the 5% equity stake. So we don't want that. It's fine for him to say how much he wants to raise. Moving forward, he's not doing that anymore. But here's what matters. Juan actually had, hang on, I'm gonna turn this music off. Juan actually was getting the door shut on his face before this. He was not getting anywhere. When he created this with the story, he put this out on Twitter. I put it out on Twitter. he closed $210,000 in 10 days. So he went from zero to that, where he was like, as soon as my story came out, people wanted to talk to me. People were like, man, I really related to that. How can I get involved? How can I help you? Are there any questions or thoughts about that? Because this is a pretty good example of the work that I do when I'm working with the short pitches for clients.
I've just put it on the chat, Melissa, but I was just saying that, you know, it was a lovely story that we could all relate to. And we'll, you know, I would say everybody in the room will say, oh, yes, I remember that for me, or I remember some, you know, and so it's so relatable that, you know, with the story has, you know, you're automatically going to emotionally connect with them. So very, very powerful. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. Yeah, we put him right at the gravesite of his father. And everyone could see that. Could you see that? And it didn't even matter if you saw one, you could see yourself at a gravesite. That's the thing. That's the other thing about storytelling is that when someone's seeing themselves in it, then you've hit it out of the park. And that's what matters. So thank you.
Melissa, Kelly, I was going to say, I liked how he presented the problem without stating it's a problem, saying that we all have a shoebox of pictures of our loved ones that we don't do anything with, and everybody could relate to it, but he didn't sort of set it up as the problem, but everybody understood that is the dilemma that we all face.
Thank you for saying that. Because again, it's not problem, solution. It's a different spin. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Advocate. She raised 1.3, and that happened because I was sitting with her, and she has an incredible idea that she is going to change the law world in that, you know, hours and hours and hours and hours of law hours that are billed go towards the research, right? And it's laborious, and it takes time and energy, and not everyone loves it. And there are some lawyers, especially like at corporate levels, that are just like, can we just go faster so I can just get this stuff done so that we can turn it around, because we've got a bottleneck going. She has a program that actually crawls the internet and finds, you talk to her system, and it finds the legal cases that are most up to date and helps write the contracts for the lawyers. It's awesome. And she is taking the law world by storm with her thing. Again, no story though. I asked her, so when was a client that you realize this is broken, this is awful? And she, without hesitation, went, oh, Jen and Ellie. I'm like, who's Jen and Ellie? And she starts to tell the story of Jen and Ellie in her presentation right out of the gate. And it was about two war veterans who had a dream to start a makeup company, but they couldn't afford the regulation money that was required for the legal regulations from the FDA. And they turned it away and started their company. And 6 months later, they got shut down, and all of their money, all of their dreams were just shattered. And that's when she knew it was broken. She starts that story. We have a soldier from the back saluting the flag. And she tells the story, and then she moves right into this has to change and goes introducing Advocate. If you want to see hers, I actually, Pradnya is, I just adore her. She is on if you go to YouTube to the Story Fruition channel, it automatically plays. So you can take a look at that. I also have story tips and things like that on that channel if you're interested. And then finally, I get a call, and Tom, a CEO who has grown many companies, sold them, they've gone public, calls me up. He goes, okay, we're ready for Andreessen Horowitz, but this presentation has no heart. And he's like, it's all numbers. You know, I've got the numbers. I'm the numbers guy. I need something. And Tom, you have the most amazing customer success stories. You save people's financial lives. Remember Jenny with the 2 kids? And he's like, oh yeah, Jenny with the 2 kids. And we infused the story of Jenny. Jenny worked for this multimedia company. She was in customer success, and she was a single mom, 2 little ones, and had barely the ability to make ends meet. She had a $600 a month daycare. It was tight. So what she did was at night, after she came home from the media company, she'd get in her Uber car with the little rugrats in the back and drive Uber Eats. Okay. Not ideal, but it was bringing in the income she needed. Then her car got stolen and Jenny didn't know what to do. So her plan was this one. It wasn't great. I'll just keep the kids up all night. That's what I'll do. I'll keep them up all night. And then when they're asleep, I'll sneak off and I'll go to work and I'll do that. And then I'll come back and it'll be okay. Yeah, it'll be okay. This is a true story. This is really happening. Obviously, she was a crumbling mess at work. And her manager pulled her in and said, what's going on? And when he learned what she was doing, they called HR and they said, what can Brightside do for her? And Brightside immediately started working with Jenny and helping her not only take her credit card debt and get that down so that she wasn't paying high interest, but they negotiated a car that she could afford and negotiated the daycare down to $150. They saved Jenny. Slides were supporting it after that. Data slides. There's, 4.7 million Jennies in just this metropolitan market. So like you have a story. He told this at Andreessen Horowitz, and here was his results: 35 million in Series A. And would he have gotten that without me? Maybe, but would he have gotten it that fast? That's the question. Right. And he does absolutely give credit to the storytelling, because he's like, it wasn't in there and it made the presentation so much more vibrant for us and people would be like, we're going to help Jenny, when they were getting ready to make their decisions on who to fund. So there is a workshop that I'm offering to this fine group. And it is, take a picture of this. It is October 20th. It's a 2-hour workshop. And I'm going to get a little bit more into the weeds of how to compose and craft your stories so that they have that compelling emotional movement. And you'll learn a lot. And again, I want you to take storytelling in business, but you better, once you start learning how to tell stories, you're the life of the party, right? You're sexy, being a great storyteller. So that is something that we can do.